like sheer amount of time that we spend awake, most of that is in our jobs. 80 to 90,000 hours over the course of our career we'll spend working. Many of us do have a voice inside of our head and a feeling inside of our body when something's a bit off, and when that voice is persistently saying, I'm just so over this on a regular basis, and you're feeling that day after day and week after week. My big push to folks is how well does your job that you're in right now perform on the basis of those criteria? Assign it a score from 0 to 5 or 0 to 10. How much autonomy do you have? What's the comp like? You should be thoughtful about not just doing free labor
Yeah.
for the company.
Tell us more about how career experiments fits into there. Is this a concept, or how can the person who's listening say, I want to do this experiment for myself? What does that look like for them? I once left a job in my career that looked really good on paper. I got a promotion there, I achieved strong results, and my pay was pretty solid. But the real reason that I left was not the title, it was the burnout. And looking back, I realized that it just wasn't the toxicity in the workplace that exacerbated my burnout. I was actually stuck in execution mode. And I didn't have room to do the work that I love, and that is developing people, helping teams grow, and truly watching talent thrive. Now, I did find the space to do that work, but it wasn't the primary focus of the organization. In the space that I did find, it came from working extra hours, after hours, just to feel like I was walking in my purpose. I wasn't just burned out, I was misaligned, and I know that I'm not alone. Studies show that 9 out of 10 professionals are willing to trade a portion of their salary for more meaningful work, but most never make the leap because they don't know where to start. And that's why I'm talking to Sarah Pomeranz, CEO of Consultants for Impact, TEDx speaker, and a strategist who helps high achievers pivot into purpose without burning out. Sarah, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you today.
Thanks so much, Candace. I'm thrilled to be here. Super excited to talk with you.
Yes, yes. So let's hop right into it. There are so many professionals who are out here in roles that feel misaligned to them, but it does, kind of like I explained, look good on paper. What are some signs that it's time to start exploring something new without like panic quitting? Or I think back in 2020, it was the great resignation that was going on. What are some signs that we can start to explore before we get to that point?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the points you raised about just that misalignment and that intrinsic sense of knowing. Many of us do have a voice inside of our head and a feeling inside of our body when something's a bit off. And when that voice is persistently saying, I'm just so over this on a regular basis, and you're feeling that day after day and week after week. My big push to folks is to not ignore that. Don't push that down, because when you put aside that internal, intrinsic dissatisfaction, right, that cognitive dissonance that is getting expressed through your body physiologically, that ultimately over time, when neglected, is what leads to burnout. And so the first step is to listen to your body, which sounds easy in theory, but I know it's something that is an ongoing growth area for me personally. Try
Mhm.
to listen, listen when your body is sending you messages, and take just one step. Maybe that looks like having a conversation with a trusted family member, a partner, or a friend, saying the words out loud. I just feel like something's off with work. That gives you a lot of license to take those inclinations and take them more seriously. And then from there, it gets easier to talk about, to plan, to think about, to dream. But the first step is always the hardest. And that's just to acknowledge that what's good on paper isn't actually good enough. It's not
Mhm.
good enough for you right now. And it's
Mhm.
okay to say that. And it doesn't mean that the next thing you do is tell your boss and quit. There definitely need to be a lot of steps in between that, an internal reckoning, and then that ultimate pink slip, if it happens down the line. But I think really just start with acknowledging it, and then we can talk about where do we go once you've taken that first step.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Definitely don't just quit. Now, I do think if you take the time to do what Sarah is saying and you realize that I'm out of alignment or I'm in an unpsychologically safe environment, then perhaps you need to take a leap faster. You got coaches and
Mhm.
consultants that can help you with things like that. But I think to your point, it's about stopping and being present. and listening to what your thoughts are telling you, your body, like everything is telling you. And so many of us ignore that, those feelings and thoughts
Yeah.
we have. Why do you think we ignore it so much? This comes up almost every week on the podcast. I'm just curious in your thoughts.
Yeah, my take overall. I mean, I agree. I think really the mass epidemic is people staying too long. People who have enough financial security and privilege, right? That's got to be the foundation of any conversation I have about careers is like being able to align your work with your passion and your purpose. It is a privilege, and that needs to be said. And also simultaneously, it's a privilege that a lot of people have but don't take advantage of, like actively ignore and don't utilize. And so for the people who have the capacity too, which I think is many more of us than we even, many people I think who are listening to this podcast are thinking about how do you use your career for fulfillment, for meaning, right? For something, for self-actualization, for growth, not just for bringing home the bread, which is its own category, definitely needs to happen. But I think for a lot of folks, the greater tragedy is how many people stay too long and then regret not leaving, not the people who leave too soon. And I think the research supports that as well, is that if
Yeah.
you have an inclination that you want to leave, you're more likely, the people who don't follow that inclination are more likely to regret the decision 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the
Yeah.
line. But why do we stay? I mean, there's a lot of really interesting research on this for people who are curious about just like inertia and sunk costs. We want it to get better. We think, okay, well, I've given this so much of my energy. Starting over feels so scary. I'm going to have to build all these new relationships. And what if my new boss is
Mhm.
even worse? And there's a fear of the unknown. You're tired, right? You're at the point in which you are disenchanted with your work. You're already probably starting to veer towards burnout. It feels like a really hard time to have the motivation and energy necessary to reinvigorate your career, to start anew. We're really big believers at Consultants for Impact in the power of strategic time away from work. It's just really hard to build a better next chapter while you are drowning in your current one. And so, whenever it's possible to take an extended time away from work, whether that's a leave of absence, whether that's being strategic about your parental leave, whether that's about, even just like a 1 week holiday that you don't use to travel and fill your schedule with life admin or, friend catch ups, but instead are like, I'm going to do some real professional daydreaming and then planning.
Mm.
That time is of a different quality than what you can fit in on the weekends and nights after you're already feeling so exhausted from your job. And so this is one of, I think, the greatest, most tangible things that is under valued, under leveraged. And that's just like real thoughtful time away where
Mm.
people do the hard work of thinking about making sure that their next move is a far better one.
Yes, yes. And I know today you're going to talk about career experiments. And, I love that you mentioned that, kind of why people stay, some of the reasons people stay. And there's a cost to it all, honestly. There's a
Mm-hmm.
cost to staying to yourself, to you not walking in purpose for longer than you were designed to. And there's also a cost that you may be holding a role that belongs to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the reason that I'm excited to hear about career experiments is because I think it gives like this clearly defined or like an actual way to know, let me stay and try this before I go. So, kind of before you tell me exactly what it is and how it gives people clarity, how did you get here? Like, what was that thing for you? I don't know if it was what you talked about in the TED Talk, but what was that thing for you that led you to career experiments? And then kind of start telling us about it.
What led me to my current work or career experiments? What are you most curious to
The
know?
career experience, like just you developing this concept, like what was that experience for you personally where you were like, oh, this is the thing that I want people to try, that's going to help them just, have the clarity before they make the leap? Was there a personal experience or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I definitely like this notion of more people approaching their career with a scientific lens and like being their own mini career mad scientists. And it kind of fits with the whole career experiment analogy. And I think part of the reason why I think it's worth doing is because I just believe so deeply in the power of your career as a tool for making the world better. I think a lot of us think about our role as citizens, like the way that we vote, the way that we show up on the streets, the things that we stand for, like that is a tool. I think a lot of us think about our role as parents or as friends as a way that we make the world better. And people think about it in terms of even a consumer, right? Nowadays, we talk about this as like, what are the products that we buy? And, what are the things we invest in from an ESG lens, maybe, right? But all of these things pale in comparison for many of us. Waking hours and just like sheer amount of time that we spend awake, most of that is in our jobs. 80 to 90,000 hours over the course of our career we'll spend working, and that is a huge opportunity. That's a massive opportunity to make the world a better place. If you can
Yeah,
align your career with working on problems that have an outsized effect, the capacity to improve millions of lives, I mean, that is tremendous potential. It shouldn't surprise any of us that like that is a way better way to make the world better than, probably just periodic recycling, which also has its role to play. Don't get me wrong, I recycle and compost as well, but I think we put so much cachet on those types of ways of making the world better, and we really undervalue the 9 to 5, or as us consultants call it, right, the 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., because that's kind of what it looks like on a more regular basis. And
yeah,
I think I felt this personally. I was in college, thinking a lot about, as many 20 somethings and 18-year-olds are, like, okay, I have the whole career in front of me. I want to leave the world a much better place. And I was untethered by a lot of the financial and like familial logistics that ultimately over the course of our careers start to inhibit that level of ambition, I think, for many of us, and that moral ambition, so to speak. And so I was working on a startup trying to address lack of access to clean water for communities in India. For folks who are curious to learn more, Candace very generously alluded to my TEDx talk about how not to ruin the world with your good intentions. Definitely
great
check
talk.
that out if you want to learn more. Thank you. And I learned so much through the process of like just trying to take a massive, like a really big swing at a huge, intimidating problem like lack of access to clean water in low and middle income countries. But I got so much further than I ever would have thought possible if you asked me at the beginning. We patented a device, we built partnerships with Indian universities. I went to India and I spoke with people who were experiencing the problem firsthand. Did we ever get the product to market? No. I mean, I think that's probably true for a ton of startups, honestly. Like, we never got that far, especially
But you learn
hardware
something.
startups. But you learn so much, and you can actually get a lot further than you think, right? Like, a big takeaway for me is like, even me as just one person who cared and was trying to address it got way further than I ever would have thought possible. And so I'm excited about a future in which smart, capable people who have these skills, who have the capacity and the passion um, to solve problems that really matter and matter on a global scale. And that's what we exist to do at Consultants for Impact, is ultimately to help people be able to align all of that energy, those 90,000 hours, with really big problems that, if they succeed in making a dent in, have the capacity to really improve millions of lives, because that behooves all of us, right? If we just
Yeah,
have all these folks working on massive problems. So yeah, that's part of what drives my desire for people to take experiments, to not view their career in such a black and white way. Either I'm working full time in this job, or I'm doing nothing at all related to this organization or problem. I want people to have a bit more of a strategic, scientific approach, because it's too important not to, right? We want our scientists who are testing our drugs to be really evidence based. And so, too, I think we as professionals who have so much to give should also be more evidence based and more methodical in where we invest our time.
yeah, yeah. I love as you put a number to it, the 90,000. I think that's going to resonate with some people. Amount of time, the amount of
It's
time that they
huge.
are spending, um, and what
Crazy.
I wrote down one thing while you were talking, because I've worked with so many people from all generations, and I've seen people retire, and it's like, oh, I'm going to retire now to go and do, the thing that makes an impact in the world. Or you even see in the media sometimes that, like, when people retire,
Mm-hmm.
they're nonprofits, and now they're going to go and volunteer, and
Oh
it's like,
yeah.
you can do those things in your role. Like, you can
Totally.
design roles, or you can incorporate that into the roles that you're doing. I remember
100%.
when I first started my career in retail, I mean, I worked at Kohl's. We were a discount store that was responsible for making sure that people got not necessities. This was something like discounted luxury clothing. And
Mm.
one of the things that was my favorite thing about the job was the volunteer. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to be the best volunteer coordinator, store manager out there. And that was kind of the
Yes.
beginning of my community impact journey, was because they would
Mm.
actually donate to the organizations if I organized a store team to go volunteer. So I was like, hey, we're going to do this every month so the companies
There we
can
go.
donate. And so it was,
Love it.
I was able to find that inside of the role and not, wait till I retire to initiate that. So tell us more about how career experiments fits into there. Is this a concept, or is this, how can the person who's listening say, I want to do this experiment for myself? What does that look like for them?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm a consultant, so I think in frameworks. Everyone will have to forgive
Yes,
me. I don't have my
me too.
slides, but
Me too.
I'll try to, I'll try to paint pictures in one's mind. So one thing that scientists do when they do an experiment is they establish a baseline. And I think this is really important and relates to what you were saying before about, like, it feels scary and it's risky to make changes, and we kind of want to de-risk things for ourselves. And so one tool that we have that's free, it's on our website, it's called the weighted factor model. And what it's going to prompt you to do is to really force yourself to think about, what does a great role look like for, let's say, Candace for the next 5 years? What are the attributes of that? Is it flexibility in hours? Is it growth opportunities? Is it a high six-figure salary? Is it capacity to work from home? Right? We all have our long list of things that are important to us. And I want you to write them all down in the tool, because that's important. And the next thing, and try to list as many as you can. Mine, I think, had like 20, for
Not
example, right?
Yeah.
The hard part is the next step, where instead of just a pros and cons list, we all have pros and cons lists and things that we want that they're nice. Now you have to weight them. Now it's about, okay, how much more important is that growth opportunity relative to salary? And you kind of already touched on this earlier when you talked about the notion of the fact that a lot of people would actually trade doing work that's more meaningful for less salary. That's hard to fully capture. And so we're going to try to force you to capture it by assigning weights, right? Numbers of how much more important it is. So you might say being able to work from home is a 3, and being able to work with people who I admire and view as potential mentors, that's a 1. Because right now, being able to work from home is just 3 times as important to me. And now I want you to score your current role. How well does your job that you're in right now perform on the basis of those criteria? Assign it a score from 0 to 5 or 0 to 10. How much autonomy do you have? What's the comp like? How good is your boss, right? All the things that are important to you. That's your baseline. You don't need to quit your job unless you find an opportunity that scores better than
Mm,
your current one, right? Like, that is a way that you can concretely de-risk the jump by actively articulating and proactively articulating what's most important to you, and relatively how proportionally how important is it to you.
yeah.
And I bet you'll find that you can find opportunities that score better. And it gives a sense of real, we're all thinking about these things. We talk about our careers, we think about our careers. I like it when people write things down. I think it makes it more real. And you learn a lot about yourself when you write things down. When I did this activity, I was surprised. Rabbi scored much higher than I would have ever thought. It didn't score higher than my current job, but I thought about it for a second after. Like, oh, that's interesting. I don't really think that job would check as many boxes as it does for me. That's good to know. But that's really the baseline. And then once you have that established, the next framework that I'll offer is really the career experiments framework, which is, there's very light lift research, and that often looks like, right, just web searches, talking to ChatGPT, or Google searches on, like, what are different types of career paths that might be good based off of these criteria. You can read blog posts for people in those careers. On our website, we have a bunch of meet the member interviews where we interview former consultants who have transitioned into roles like program officer at a foundation or chief of staff at a policy think tank, jobs that you'd never hear about in children's books about jobs, right? No 5-year-old is saying, I want to be a policy officer at a foundation. But there's so many jobs out there now that you never heard of, right? You have no sense
Right.
of. And so starting really broad and thinking
Yeah.
really broad of just like what's out there, what's possible. Because the reason I think so many of us are unhappy in our jobs and hate job searches is that we are artificially constraining the option pool. We are saying, I am this person, I do this type of work. And that automatically just eliminates so many jobs that you could find fulfilling and be happy with that you've just written off because you've never heard of them before, or you have some rough heuristic that's just vibes. Like the
Hmm.
job seems
Hmm.
like, you know, I don't know anyone who does that. Seems kind of not that prestigious, not that interesting, not that sexy, so I'm just not even going to think about it. But
Right.
once you start doing that and broaden the landscape, you look into so many different areas. And then you do go down the next level, right? And you start to go down this funnel. And the next level of research is a little bit more constrained, but it's a little bit more of your time per role. And that's when you start having coffee chats and reaching out to people in those jobs and saying, hey, could I have 15 minutes of your time to talk about what it means to be a chief operating officer at an early stage nonprofit? I want to learn more about that. Or I want to learn about being a research manager because I don't really know much about that. Can we talk about it? Obviously, this is a great way to learn. It's also a great way to network. I think networking through learning is a huge hack.
Hmm.
Like, I think
Hmm.
people love to help other people learn. People really detest the framing of networking. Many people, many
Yeah.
busy people, many
I
important
think it's the
people
word. I
detest the
think we
framing.
overuse the word, and now
Yeah.
people are like, I don't want to
Ugh,
network.
networking. Do I have to? I don't want to do that, right? When you say I want a relationship build, I mean, that's how I think about networking. It's
Yes.
about building relationships, right? Like we all care about the people in our lives, and
Yeah.
I just want more cool people, and I want to help them, and I want to make their dreams come true. And heck, it wouldn't be a bad thing if they help me sometimes too, but like it's a relationship, you know? That's
Hmm.
very much how I conceive of it anyways. And so you're building those relationships, you're having those short conversations, and you're asking really good questions. Because from my perspective, anyone can have a good answer, but the true testament of really fun people to work with are those who ask great questions. So ask
Hmm.
great questions on these calls. My favorite question to ask in an interview is what's a common misconception that you had about this job before you got in it? Because that's a much harder question to lie about, right? So it forces people to be honest. I love questions like that.
Yes.
And then the next level is like, okay, projects, right? Volunteers. So you have a sense of what they do now. Maybe your follow up email alludes like, I actually have 5 minutes or 5 hours, sorry, this weekend or this month. I'd love to help you guys with this fundraising thing that you're working on, or this research project, or this landscape analysis. I can do that, right? Like I know how to do that, and I'd be happy to support you in it.
Yeah.
And you'll see how the work feels through doing that, right? You have a
Yeah.
much better sense of whether you'll enjoy working on that team or at that organization or in that role once you do the work concretely.
Yeah.
And there's loads of fellowship programs too that exist to help people try out different opportunities and
Hmm.
different career paths before they commit. And like I said, everything in this career experiment has the explicit benefit of knowledge and
Yeah.
learning, and
Yeah.
then lots of other benefits too, like network development,
Yeah.
credentials, skill building. Yeah, so it's a great way, I think, of just de-risking the pivot for
Yeah.
yourself, and you'll have a lot of fun along the way.
Yes, yes, and obviously, first of all, this is great, great explanation. I was like, oh, this is a very clearly defined model that I think
Thanks.
definitely people who haven't done the work or have done the work can go and say, all right, let me take this inventory and do these activities. And of course, people, especially people who are looking to get into something else, and have already
Hmm.
decided that, hey, it's time. They'll probably, be able to do this a little faster. There's also those though that may not be, may be in their role, and they want to stay at their current job, and they want to do this
Yep.
experiment in their current job. Is there anything that looks different for them if they like, I don't want to leave my job, I want to grow in this organization, so I want to start redesigning what success looks like for me here? Is there anything different that they should
Absolutely.
think about?
Yes, such a healthy prompt. I mean, before I left my job, right, my journey looked like I was working on that startup, Sulis, and then I went to Accenture and I was doing strategy consulting for government clients, for nonprofits, um, and I had already dipped my toe into this world of it was an obsession, a side obsession of mine was not making the world worse. And you kind of get that sense from my TED talk. Like I was pretty paranoid as a white American girl going to India trying to address lack of access to clean water, that I there was a real easy pathway in which I made things just worse because I didn't know what I was doing. I think it's really easy to
Mhm.
do that. And so I was obsessed with measurement and evaluation and putting systems in place. And so I was reading books about this. There's a whole field in development economics and public
Mhm.
health about how do you measure and evaluate the impact that you're having. And when I got to Accenture, I was like, we're doing all these social impact projects, but nobody is employing best practices around measurement and evaluation. How do we know that our recommendations are good or like the right ones or that we're not causing all this harm? And so I started just hosting events and bringing in speakers from the conferences that I was going to in my own free time because this was my passion, right?
Mhm.
And you can do that. Like you can, I think so many people are just waiting for permission for someone to be like, oh yeah, you can host this event or you can host this like fundraiser or you can start this employee resource
Yeah.
group or this club and the reality is nobody's going to tell you that's your job, but they're often not going to tell you it's not if you act like it is and you're good at it. So I would do like guerrilla warfare marketing type I think it just called guerrilla marketing tactics where I would and I would create an event that looked legit, use the branding from the company, from my consulting firm, and then I would blast it to a bunch of newsletters, probably like thousand employees, and people would come, like hundreds of people would come to these sessions. Nobody was formally hosting it, like I was hosting it, but you know again it's that kind of it's true entrepreneurship, right? It's taking an
Mhm.
entrepreneurial lens, which is entrepreneurship is fundamentally about the capacity to mobilize resources to accomplish things, and
Mhm.
you can do that just as well if not better inside a Fortune 500 or multinational corporation as you can do it outside of one. So
Mhm.
start thinking about the resources that are available to you, both financial but also social. The people you have access to inside
Mhm.
of these companies are tremendous resources. The projects, the time, right? Like billing. A lot of we think about that in law a lot is like pro bono work, but you could be thinking about what are the pro bono equivalents, like the volunteering that you alluded to, Candace,
Yeah.
in your company. You can make so much happen. And then don't neglect donating, right? I'm just a huge believer in the capacity for strategic donations to have a massive impact on the world. I'm a 10% pledger with Giving What We Can, which means that I've pledged to donate 10% of my lifetime earnings to like evidence-based high impact nonprofits.
Yeah.
And I think for many of us, that's a huge resource in our toolkit. I recommend people check out the Giving What We Can website.
Mhm.
GiveWell is like a third party evaluator. There's so many resources if you're interested in this.
Okay.
And I'm sure many of us, are curious about how we can get our donations to go even further for us, just like we care about stretching our budgets and our investing.
Yeah.
So happy to talk about that too. But you have a lot of levers, right? So you have your time in terms of your career, but you have your connections, you have your like credentials and the prestige that comes with working at your company that can open doors to other places. You could create collaborations with nonprofits between your company and nonprofits, and leverage your position. So really think holistically about all of the things that are at your disposal. Then go back to your weighted factor model and be really clear on like,
Mm.
okay, well, these are my priorities for my job. So I can either look to improve these numbers by going elsewhere, or I can improve those numbers by just making my job work for me
Yeah.
in these different ways. And that's an option too.
I love it. Creating, I mean, it creates another level of visibility for what you're passionate about. I had a guest on the
100%.
show last season, Dr. Shayla White, and she talked about that, like visibility, people knowing her outside of her role was something that actually gave
Mm-hmm.
her fuel while she was in the role. And so she's like, I
100%.
would, when I'm at lunch and they, they having conversation with people, I'm letting them know. I'm looking at, while I'm
Oh
here
yeah.
doing this role, advancing my public speaking career. I'm thinking about applying to host our next conference. I do this
Oh
outside of
my
work where
goodness.
I'm passionate about bringing
So
people
important.
together. And so she was, doing
It's your
these
brand.
things. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It's establishing a career brand. And so the reason
100%.
why thought about it while you were talking is because sometimes before we get to the career experiment, or we're starting to diagnose misalignment, and we
Mhm.
haven't told anybody that we were
Mhm.
unhappy, or that we were not
Mhm.
passionate about these, that we were passionate about these things. We're expecting our jobs to be like, I need to
Oh yeah.
fulfill Candace because I can read her mind. No, you got to say this stuff out loud so people can know. So
100%.
I love the example you gave of start organizing stuff. I do always put a caution of like, don't start organizing things that are above your scope and your pay grade, and then you start setting a norm that where they start to expect you to do this and to do your job. Figure out a way where you can make those things merge together, where it fulfills your passion, your purpose, but then also is tied to your performance to some degree, or you can connect it to what you're doing in the future. And
Yeah,
share your thoughts on that. I
absolutely.
mean, I'm okay if you have a different opinion on it, but um, I
I'll
know I've
always
done
tell you,
stretch
Candace.
assignments and done those extra things so many times, and I couldn't even chart the
Yeah.
path. I was trying to get noticed, and my
Yeah.
intentions were wrong. It wasn't the company. So, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. Love this. So much to dig into here. Yes. First of all, obviously, I'm biased from having come from the world of consulting, in which your expectation is that you will do what we call at Accenture plus ones, but other companies call them plus tens, which is way more
Mm-hmm.
accurate, I think. Other companies call them magic time. If you're an industrial or organizational psychologist, you call them organizational citizenship behaviors. These are all the elements of your job that are not in the job description, but that are kind of expected of you or that you fit in
Mm-hmm.
around the edges. In consulting, you are expected to do help with recruiting, to do business development, to do all these things on the side because the nature of the work is ebb and flow. And so you will have downtimes and God forbid you have a breather. So you have to fill that with all these other things. So I think it's a really important point that you're making, right? Like if your organization isn't set up to reward that and it's coming at the cost of your actual work, then yeah,
That,
you should be thoughtful about
mm,
not just doing free labor
yeah,
for the company. I strongly agree with that, and
without
especially as women,
boundary,
it's something.
without boundaries.
Yeah, we need to be mindful of this because it's super easy to just take everything on. And to your point, to set the expectation that you're the person who always raises her hand or their hand, and it's that's a slippery slope. But if it's the kind of thing that fills your cup, and you're getting a lot from this, and it's kind of your way of having an impact, and you're feeling bored because that's also something that happens. Sometimes it's like you don't have too much on your plate. You're just kind of waiting for more things to happen. I mean, it depends
Yeah.
on who you are, right? There's different career profiles, and every piece of career advice, somebody needs to hear the exact opposite, which is the challenge of both your and my our jobs is to say things that are like robustly useful to a wide range of people when half of them need to kind of hear the opposite. But for folks who are, struggle to say no to things, pick wisely, pick a couple things and get buy-in from your manager that this is the kind of thing that will be rewarded if
Mm-hmm.
done well. Try to position it as like this is how it's helping the firm. I was constantly selling myself and my intentional impact collaborative was what I called it. And I talked about how it was going to help us with retention, that it was going to it was going to be good press, connected to the business metrics, connected to the bottom line, speak the language of the decision makers like always.
Yeah.
But still do the thing you want to do.
Right.
Like do the thing that you feel like is actually going to excite you in the way that does excite you.
Yeah.
And also don't expect that everyone else is just going to automatically understand the value that you're bringing. You
Mm-hmm.
have to do that legwork.
Yes, yes, and communicate that value. So good. That is a perfect answer to that, and just a perfect response. So thank you for sharing that and giving that amazing insight.
Of
So I
course.
know that you have helped many professionals pivot into high impact roles. If you could name one mindset shift that's helped them, or maybe even you, take action with less fear and more intention, name that for me, and then we're gonna end it with the final five words after that.
So hard
One
to pick
mindset.
only one mindset shift, but
Yeah, I
I'll
know it's
try to.
so many.
Yeah,
If there was like a
there's
game
so
changer, like this was the thing for me, or this is the thing that I see common with clients that I think people should do.
many. confidence that your resume doesn't disappear when you take that first risk. I think there's a lot of people who feel like, I can't start the startup I want to start. I can't take the pay cut because, like, what if it doesn't work out? Then what? And
Mm,
for the folks that I'm speaking to, many of whom
mm,
are insecure overachievers. I would identify also as an insecure overachiever. We collect credentials until we die, and then we're like, oh yeah, we're still learning, we're still growing. Like, I'm not ready to give back or to deploy these learnings because I'm still growing. And life isn't as long as you think it's going to be. Try to find ways to live your passion and your purpose now, whether that's in your current role or pivoting. But for people who are like, I know what I want to do. I want to do this risky thing. Um, they A huge unlock that we hear all the time is just somebody else saying, who's also done the risky thing, hey, it's okay. There isn't actually that far to fall. And again, this is really true for people who are in the position of, they've done, built a certain amount of career capital, and they've, gotten those additional degrees, and they've worked for the prestigious companies already. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I think Sarah's talking about some people, but not me, consider applying for a career conversation with us. And I can look at your profile and tell you, like, do you actually need yet another credential? Do you need another degree? Do you need another 5 years at this prestigious company? Or maybe you have everything you need and it's time for you to just go fly.
yeah.
But it is individualized. So but I think more, again, go back to my initial point, more people just stay and don't take the risk, and that ends up being the real cost. Then take the risk and realize, I never should have gone.
Yeah, I mean, just great points that you make. I mean, I think I call it taking inventory. And I would be willing to bet that a lot of the people who you're having that conversation with of, I need to go get another certification, I'd be willing to bet they were female. Am I right or wrong? Just tell if I'm wrong, I'm willing to be wrong on my own platform. Am I right or wrong? Is it female?
Ma- Many are, but there's so many ways to be marginalized. So there's
Yeah,
plenty of folks who, it's like, gender is one component of it, but then there's lots of folks who are first generation,
yeah,
right? Or like they grew up without a lot, and they're a story of economic mobility, and
yeah,
and or they're the children of immigrants. Like, there's so many ways that people fundamentally, or society tells them that
yeah.
they're not the right person for the job, or they're not enough. And so but yeah, plenty of women, of course, as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I the only reason I brought that up is because there's like a pay scale. So we were doing this pay scale review of like the pay gap and just doing some work around, and we
Mm-hmm.
did a response video for pay scale a couple years ago. And in that research, in their annual report, it talked about that the most degree, the one with the most certifications in the research they did was the female. And I find in my own
Mm-hmm.
work, when I'm trying to stop someone from like, hey, it's most likely who our target, most of our clients are the female client. But you are
Mm-hmm.
exactly right. I mean, I think it depends on the culture. It depends on what their environment is, what they're responding to that can make them marginalized. And I think the overarching theme, which I appreciate you talking about this, is take inventory first. The degree does not define you. The certification doesn't define you. And it's usually, unless you're like a doctor or a lawyer, or certain roles where you have to have those things in order to do your job proficiently, that might
Yeah,
not even be the success factor. So you might need it. It
totally.
might be good. You might need it. But just check first. Just check first. So I'm so
A
glad you
hundred
brought that
percent.
up. Yeah.
And there's a real cost, I think, to just getting that additional degree. Like, you can imagine a lot of the folks that I'm speaking to are, do I need to get an MBA? Should I get an MBA? And
Yes,
that could
that's
be a
it.
whole other podcast
Yeah.
episode about
Yes.
my thoughts on MBA programs one way or another.
Yeah.
But they're like, just remember to put in your cost benefit analysis that there's a real opportunity cost, both in earnings but also in impact and in
Mhm.
learning from the job,
Yeah.
in terms of just like the time away from the workforce and from building. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's the right thing to do, but I think people just, they discount that more than they should.
Yeah.
There's costs on the other side too.
Yes. Yes. Sarah, since from pre-show until right now, it has been such a pleasure. and a delight
Likewise.
to talk to you. I have learned so much. I always learn from my guests.
Same.
I've learned a ton talking to you today. I love talking to like-minded people too. We were connecting. We almost didn't make it here today, y'all, because we were connecting before the show started on just just things that matter to us. We were talking about goal setting. So Sarah, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. As I ask all of our guests, please share your final 5 words and how the people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, and likewise, it's been an absolute pleasure. I thought a lot about this, and I think the 5 words that I would love everyone who's listening to think a bit more about is start with the problem first. And when you're thinking about your career and you're thinking about how can I die with no regrets, I think
Mm,
pick the right problem. It does so much of the work. We live in an age in which we're often obsessed with the tech and the tools and the solutions, but I think honestly picking big problems and
mm,
then being willing to update and pivot and adjust to do what's necessary to solve those problems leads to a lot of meaning and purpose and value in one's
mm,
life. And you can connect with other people who are aligned with those problems. And there's nothing more fulfilling than finding your community of people who care about the problems that you care about too, and that you can actually then work together to solve them is deeply energizing and motivating. And I feel so privileged to be able to help other people do that and to get to do that myself day in and day out. And so if you're excited about thinking about solving big problems, definitely check out consultantsforimpact.org. We do free one-on-one career advising for current and former consultants. And we have a newsletter that you can subscribe to regardless of what your professional background is. And all the resources that I mentioned, career reflection guides, weighted factor models, all of that good stuff is on the website. So we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think.
awesome. Awesome. Again, thank you so much for joining the 5 Minute Career Hack podcast. I know that our guests, our listeners today will get at least one, but probably 5 things that you said today that is going to change the trajectory of their career. And we are so grateful that you came on to share all of your gifts, your talents, and your expertise. Sarah, I hope that this is not the last time that you and I are connecting and working together
It
in
won't be.
some capacity. But for today, thank you so much for coming on. And until next time, I love y'all and be well.